I want a train. You are like,
So this is Senate Transportation. It's Friday, the 31st, and we're coming back online with the Transportation for America update from Mr. Perez. And if you could introduce yourself and we're yours for apparently the next half hour.
Great. Well, good morning, and hopefully my screen is showing up on yours. I'm Benito Perez. I'm the Policy Director at Transportation for America, which is a program of Smart Growth America, where we envision a country where it doesn't matter who you are, where you live, you should be able to live in a community that's healthy, prosperous, and resilient. And we do this through a three-pronged impact model of technical assistance, advocacy, and thought leadership. And then in the realm of transportation, we guide our work based on three principles of safety over speed, state of repair, and investing in the rest of our transportation system. So I'm going to be covering quite a bit, and I understand some slides are before you, so feel free if any questions pop up to stop me and I will help. Otherwise, we'll do questions at the end as well. And I like to start off with any and all of my presentations with this fundamental question that hopefully you can take away yourself when you're having oversight hearings with your agency of transportation or with other transportation stakeholders. And it's the question of who we're designing our transportation system for. Is it for vehicles or for people? And when we think about people, not to think of them as, one idea versus the idea that people are aging in place, people with disabilities, children playing on our streets, including those that have been historically marginalized from transportation choices. And those people also belong to a community, and no two communities are alike. We have communities like here in Washington, D.C., two places like New York, but also places like there at your state capital in Montpelier. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Oxford, Mississippi, Wheeling, West Virginia, among other communities around the country. Regardless of that community, there's some ongoing transportation challenges across this country that we're all facing together. In the realm of safety, we have a national roadway safety crisis. We've been hearing conversations from USDOT, vehicle safety situations have been improving slightly. Crashes have been going down. However, the vulnerable road user safety crisis has been getting worse. On average, every hour, someone's being killed on our streets in this country. That's in the last couple of years means a 26% increase in pedestrian fatalities on our roadways. We have a state of good repair issue. The American Society of Civil Engineers notes how there's 800 billion in deferred maintenance on our roadways and bridges and 150 billion deferred maintenance on transit, which also then spells reliability challenges, being able to reliably travel on our transportation network. And for some communities, there's also the challenge of the lack of mobility choices. And especially in rural America, there's the challenge that the transportation system has been set up to be very auto-oriented. And with some of that population, a third of them cannot or are not able to or do not want to be driving, whether because of age, ability, operational concerns, or economic pressures. There's also accessibility challenges, people with disabilities being able to safely and efficiently travel the network, whether on their sidewalks, on transit, on rail, and even in aviation, even though I focus on surface transportation. And as you all know, in your community was front and center in the last few years, the challenges of climate change with unpredictable weather and environmental pressures on our transportation system. And lastly, those stakeholders, the workforce that is helping to build, operate, and maintain your system is aging, and they're facing increasing transportation challenges, with innovations such as autonomous connected vehicles. How do you incorporate them into the transportation system? The introduction of scooters, among other issues. How do they, balancing all those issues with what they've been doing for years And some of these ongoing challenges have to do with past transportation and use decisions that we've made. And that could mean the difference of some communities having members that can be able to access jobs and community services, regardless of mode, because their land use allows that travel to be like under 2 miles in some cases. Whereas in some communities, those decisions has spread out some of those jobs and community services that unless you have a car, you're shut out from those opportunities. And I won't belabor this point, but as you may know, transportation accounts for a third of climate emissions in this country. And we made great strides in vehicle efficiencies. Electric vehicles has been introduced. We've also introduced other methods in communities, transit, bike ped, passenger rail. And yet, through all these efforts, especially in the efficiency space for vehicles, more people are driving, and that goes back to those land use decisions, which then in turn create those hidden environmental impacts of driving, the pavement, the urban heat island effect, particulate matter, and there's other factors that contribute to increased climate emissions. And we can see that also in the national picture, how we're investing our federal dollars. Right now, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the way most states are spending it, we're going to be leading towards a net increase in emissions. And so it's going to be incumbent on states taking leadership with the funding that they are getting to be aggressive on how they rethink their use of those funds to make a dent in those emissions. And in Vermont, and I know Transportation for Vermont spoke to you all yesterday, so some of this might be repetition, but I wanted to reiterate some points specific for Vermont. The challenges with funding. There's erosion of the federal state gas tax revenue due to, electric vehicles, fuel efficiency. There's also inflation pressures, and there's a need to look at alternative funding revenues. There's also your interstate growth pressures and externalities, understanding that you have pressures coming from Massachusetts, New York, and Connecticut, wanting to enjoy that Vermont lifestyle. So that's creating some pressures on you all. And then limited mobility choice. I have to tip the hat to the fact that Vermont, compared to many other states in this country, does spend more money per capita on transit. However, the challenge is those choices are still not going far enough in being frequent and reliable. So there's room for improvement there. There's also the challenge of lack of protection for vulnerable road users, and that has to do with national standards and design practices that have percolated to the State Agency of Transportation that have created a car-oriented mindset that create those challenges and those lack of protections. So what's influencing the status quo? And with most communities, we design for that 9 to 5 downtown work trip. That might be the big city, that might be the small Main Street USA, but we're always orienting our transportation decisions around that 9 to 5 commuter. And then when it comes to our investments, I like to show this graphic, and it has to do with the fact that we, as a nation, have started to prioritize things such as roadway safety, maintenance, but we've only been treating them around the edges and not tackling the status quo underlying policies and investment decisions. So as we try to make improvements, we continue to dig the hole deeper. Another thing you might hear from engineers and planners, especially when it comes to various projects, we can do speed and safety projects. I heard this in a project in Utah. They were talking about interstate widening. They were saying they're going to improve speeds and improve safety along the corridor. It's impossible to do both. Speed requires removing any friction and barriers, and it's oriented towards one mode. Versus safety, you're going to have to slow down speeds by introducing frictions so that everyone can meet where they are, be able to recognize who they are on the streetscape. And as we think about our built environment, the siloed approach into those elements, transportation, land use, housing, health, and education, have continued to perpetuate these livability challenges. So it'll be incumbent thinking ahead towards the future. How do we start to break down those silos and think more holistically across the built environment to start tackling some of these challenges and create opportunities. I like to use this quote from Tom Perez, senior advisor from the past administration. Budgets are moral documents. They reflect the values of government. And when you compromise, certain values, you're making a statement about the communities you care or do not care about. And we see that in the federal transportation ecosystem with the fact that 80% of our federal dollars in transportation go to our highways, and 20% of that goes to transit and every other use, bikes, ped. So we're making a statement right now federally that we care about cars over people. And more money does equate to more problem. As the feds have started to tackle some of those issues, they continue to treat it marginally. They've created repair programs and put stringent requirements on it. However, the challenge there is they at the same time continue to perpetuate formula dollars to the states and state flexibility to allow the state to do as they please with those dollars. However, what the challenge is, you all have, as legislators, a wide legislative portfolio. It's not just transportation. And you all rely on the expertise and knowledge of your agency of transportation. And I'm guilty of it too. We are resistant to change at times. So it becomes a challenge when the agency of transportation wants to continue doing what they've historically have done. They have made strides, but they continue to do the status quo of focus on car-oriented policies and development. Even the higher up trade organization, the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, has put out their 2025 policy agenda, which talks about reducing or eliminating discretionary grants and focusing on increasing those formula dollars and state flexibility, which in turn they want to continue advancing roadway-oriented projects. And I also want to show this slide here. You all play a part in the policy levers that govern our built environment, govern our society. And all that is underpinned by the public, the people that brought you into your office, and we're responsible to their needs and concerns. And you all have your role to play in setting the investments and policy parameters. And I wanted to highlight specifically the state legislative oversight role that you all have, because it's going to be more important to have that oversight over your agency of transportation. They have the expertise and skills to deliver, but you all have the oversight and legislative powers to impose those measurable and tangible outcomes that you all are desiring for your state. So as you start to think ahead of how do I start to influence the agency of transportation? Well, I want to highlight one aspect of it because that kind of governs a lot of the things that they do. And it has to do with the state of the practice with community engagement and project development, led by planners and engineers. And when they're soliciting feedback for any project, they're asking the community to meet them where they are. They set the time, location, and format, which may or may not be convenient for the community to make their voice heard. And once the community shows up, the problem and solutions have already been defined, and the agency of transportation is only seeking editorial feedback, which then creates a lack of opportunity for ownership and participation in the process. The communities know what they want, they just don't know how to achieve it, and that's where the agency of transportation has those tools and the skill set to be able to deliver on what the community knows they need and wants. So there's opportunities to think about bridging that gap. And someone might start thinking about that access to information, how to simplify it in layman's terms so it is tangible and understandable for the stakeholder, the community. And that in turn means transparency and reforming those community engagement practices, meeting folks where they are, and positioning government to be a community tool. And in thinking broader, I want to show this capacity maturity model because changes are not going to happen overnight. So it's something to assess where your agency of transportation sits based on the goals and outcomes you expect your agency to be at. from, you know, eventually you all want to be able to tout that your agency of transportation is world class. And that's going to be incumbent on evaluating the four pillars that comprise that capacity: people, process, policies, and technology. And that gives an opportunity where, as you think ahead on any agency of transportation reform that you may wish to pursue legislatively, these might be your target points to focus your legislative recommendations. So towards recommended actions, I want to highlight some examples around the country from your fellow peer legislatures. After much debate and advocacy in Washington State in 2022, they passed Move Ahead Washington, and they reassessed their values and what they want their transportation system to do. They asked themselves that question: are we designed for vehicles or for people? And they flipped the script on that 80-20 split that most legislatures replicate from the federal level. And they turned 80% of that funding oriented towards transit, maintenance, active transportation, and 20% for roadway improvements and expansion. Maryland in 2021 passed their Transit Safety and Investment Act. And I highlight this example because they set a mandatory baseline and operations and maintenance standards and funding for their transit agency. And in Massachusetts, also in 2021, they passed the MBTA Communities Act, and it might be more familiar to you all since they're your neighbors. And the premise there was the legislature imposed a law on the municipalities to strongly encourage them to change land use decisions that then maximizes the state transit investments, as well as facilitating multifamily housing and pro-housing growth in their communities. The other example I want to highlight is from California. In 2017, they passed Senate Bill 1, the Road Repair and Accountability Act. And in that one, they highlighted establishing targeted metrics and outcomes that they expected Caltrans to achieve for the investments that have been putting in federally and statewide. They expected, 90% of their roads to be at good state of pavement. They expected, 95% of culverts to be at a certain standard. So they started setting specific metrics that then, when it came to annual oversight in the legislature, they could hold the agency to account. Like, have you met this? And have you been showing meaningful progress to achieve that? And with most states, there's the issue of funding limitations and limited resources. So I know Vermont does have a project prioritization process, but I also wanted to highlight this story from Virginia. And this came from, started at an MPO level in the Hampton Roads region, where I had the opportunity to work at. And we developed a programs priority process. And the premise was first defining what our values are and try to cut through the debate of, I'm the oldest city, I'm the biggest city, I have the shipyard. It's like, what is the overall regional values that we care about? And translating that into measurable goals and metrics. And then State Senator Yvonne Miller, because we had legislative members sit on the MPO board. She went through the process, liked it so much that she talked about it with her peers in the state legislature, and they worked the process out to create what is now today Virginia Smart Scale, to be able to define what is those values that the state cares about and translate that into multimodal goals and metrics. So what does that mean for you all? Looking ahead, these are recommendations for your consideration. Is with those limited resources, is looking at that maintenance first approach. That might looking at setting targets like in California, or what Maryland did in setting mandatory baseline funding for your agency of transportation. It might look like at refining your project prioritization policy to reflect those values, like Virginia, or Minnesota's transportation climate law that they passed. And in their case, they valued reducing climate change impacts. So they have a VMT reduction metric. And if it doesn't meet it, they ask the DOT to either mitigate it or remove the project. Also take the opportunity to revisit your complete streets policy. In Washington State, in addition to that Move Ahead Washington package, they added a requirement for the state DOT for any project over $500,000, they must incorporate complete streets elements in the implementation aspect. And also provide opportunities for quick build solutions. A lot of challenges for state DOTs is, oh, I can't do quick build because I don't have the authority to do it. We have to follow these design parameters. So it might be helpful to provide the legislative nudge to them. It's like, yes, you can do this, and we encourage you to do so. So, because a lot of communities benefit from being able to see, touch those solutions before making those big investments. And look at policy developments that encourages multimodal transit-oriented development, such as the Communities Act in Massachusetts, and look at those opportunities to bolster economic and housing growth alongside those enhanced mobility choices. So those are my remarks. There's a few additional resources in the slides if you want to dig down to some data, like our Danish by Design report, our Community Connectors portal, which gives you the opportunity to be able to decode some common terminology you might hear from your agency of transportation. We also have this alternative gas tax framework. We are agnostic to the solution because we realize states and communities have different contexts, but we encourage thinking about those solutions within this four-pronged framework of revenue stability, incentive and outcomes, equity, and feasibility and scalability. And as you may or may not know already, here in Washington, Congress has already started the conversations on the next surface transportation reauthorization. So those values and priorities that you care about, it'll be incumbent on you all to be starting to articulate that to your congressional delegation to ensure that they start to plant a flag in the sand to ensure those priorities are reflected in the next reauthorization bill. And we provide a short guide to help understand that process and de-wonkify it. And we have additional resources about divided by design, the impacts of transportation on dividing communities historically. And then Foot Traffic Ahead is an economic analysis report that talks about how multimodal oriented development actually yields greater economic output. And with that, those are the end of my remarks. And open the questions.
Thank you. Questions? Senator White.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. I really appreciate you taking the time to present to us. I had requested that the committee hear from you in particular, because I think we have traditionally in Vermont done exactly what you described, which is focus on cars and car travel and not people travel. And unfortunately, that has led to the 1/4 of Vermonters. I know you said 1/3 nationally, but 1/4 of Vermonters don't have a license for any number of reasons. So that's 25% of our population who isn't in a car behind the wheel as the driver. So they don't have the same mobility to do the things that people who have access to a driver's license and are driving do. So that's a lot of people that weigh on my mind. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to what you would recommend around the complete streets. You had noted requiring that any project over $500,000 or $500,000 be required to have complete streets within it. Could you speak a little bit more to that, and if that's been done in other states, those requirements on like the cost of the project versus like the type of project?
Sure. So the example stems from Washington State. That was part of their Move Ahead Washington package. They mandated any and all transportation roadway projects must include an element that might be protected bike lanes, sidewalks, etc. And they created a very stringent waiver process to ensure that engineers don't try to waive out of it. Because in most other states, I'll pick on Virginia, they do have a complete streets policy, but their waiver process is very lax to the point that we'll just waive it out. Don't worry about it. It's too expensive. We can't do that. But Washington State and your neighbors in Massachusetts have a much more stringent waiver requirement. I think in Massachusetts, you have to go up to the Secretary of Transportation to request that waiver. That can't be your district engineer. So if you want to seek a waiver, you're going to have to justify it to the agency head. And that's the example out of Massachusetts.
That's really helpful, actually, because we do have, I don't know if it's, we would describe it as a waiver process, but basically the cost is too great, which could really be anything. You don't have to put forward a complete streets adherent project. So we similarly have that problem in our own state. And then I had one other kind of point to make, which I think you hinted at the beginning, but when we talk about social isolation, which has been noted as an epidemic by our previous Surgeon General, the key factor that seems to be leading to that social isolation is people not leaving their homes, or when they leave their homes, they're not actually physically interacting with other people. They're in their vehicle, going to a place, going home. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to just the social aspect of what it means to be so car-centric as a culture versus places like maybe a college town or in Europe in certain parts where they have much more of this open streets, people seeing each other, less car-focused culture.
Sure. It's actually, my colleagues and I have been talking about this quite a bit. So if we think about communities, and I'll go almost a century ago, before the car was dominant, we were moving at, as fast as, transportation would allow us, that was the streetcar. But otherwise, most people were walking. The bike was present there since the end of the 19th century. But a lot of the communities were set up in a way that you had to interact with your neighbors. You walked by them, you saw them, you interacted with them. And even if you had conflict with them or different viewpoints, you had to interact with them and would come together in moments of crises. But land use decisions and transportation choices between, the car that you can drive by yourself, then facilitated sprawl, which then can be spread out, deteriorated that community fabric. And then what that happens now later on in life, when through abilities denigrating or other reasons that can no longer operate a vehicle, now you're stuck in a community. You're in that single family home, and on an acre plot, or very spread out, and then there's no transit, there's no sidewalks, and you're trapped. Versus that community a century ago, you would walk out and you'd see your neighbors, and so this is an opportunity. If it's something, if it's a value that you all care about a lot, that might be looking at, okay, how can we nudge our municipalities to rethink their land use decisions, much akin to what Massachusetts has done, saying, hey, we want to, and they're trying to tackle multiple issues. They're trying to tackle a housing affordability issue and maximize their investments for transit, because nationally, they say on average, you want to have 3,000 people per square mile to make transit viable. And with a lot of communities, and probably in Vermont even, there's not that kind of density. So it makes it challenging. And yes, Vermont has been spending high dollars per capita for transit for your residents, but it's not reaching that level of density yet to make transit truly viable, frequent, and a competition to the car, a reasonable competition to the car.
Thank you.
Right.
And I'm sorry, sorry.
I was going to thank you for coming. We're a little over, and our next scheduled testifying is here, and we want to thank you for showing up. And this was very, very interesting.
You're welcome. And if any other questions pop up, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, the Lieutenant Governor came to me with an issue of car transfer and would like to relay that to the committee. And, we do have some, adjustments being made in, the DMV bill, around that. And I told him to, he ought to bring his, concerns to the committee, and, thank you for coming.
Thank you. One of the things I've always focused
You
on.
need to start.
Oh, my
with your
name is John Rogers.
You've been around long enough to know
Yeah, but how easy we forget.
that.
One of my main issues my whole career and one of my main campaign focuses is helping out working class and poor people in this state. And I think a lot of the things that have been instituted in this state have been regressive, even though they've been good policies. They have affected poor and moderate income people more than others. I have registered vehicles before where I was upset when I got to the DMV and they told me I had to pay a higher tax than what I paid for the vehicle. But this year I just bought a Subaru and it just highlighted how hard this is on poor people. I bought a $7,000 Subaru because it needed tires, hadn't had any maintenance done. So it needed 100,000 mile maintenance and it needs a bunch of rust work, which I'm going to do in the spring. When I went to register the car, they said I need to pay tax on $12,500. Now, there is no place in the state of Vermont on any other product where you have to pay based on some sticker. If you go to a car dealer and the sticker on the brand new car says $70,000 and you negotiate down to $60,000, you pay sales tax on $60,000, not $70,000. And when we look at an NADA book or powers or whatever they are these days, that is average across America. And let's face it, an average car in Vermont is not an average car in North Carolina or Oklahoma. I just had it inspected and my mechanic said that does have some rust under there. It's okay for this year. So if I don't do the body work, which is going to be $4,000 or $5,000, it may not get inspected next year. Now, is a car that lasts a person 1 year worth $12,500? I would say no. And should I have to pay sales tax on a car that's not going to last over a year? It's $12,500. My point is, I had to put new tires on it. I paid sales tax on them. When I have to get a new tailgate for the car because it's rusty, I'm going to pay sales tax on that. All the labor I'm paying, those people are paying income tax. This is affecting people that don't have the money to buy new cars. This is affecting the people that need to get to work. And let's be frank about it. The inspection process is also a problem. And we have thousands of Vermonters driving with no inspection sticker today because they cannot afford a new car and the garage won't inspect their cars. We have this is varying from my main subject a little bit, but this is all affecting poor people more than anyone else. If you can afford a brand new car every 2 years, you're never going to have the inspection sticker problem. You're not going to have yellow lights on the dash, and you're going to pay your sales tax based on what you paid. And I'm just asking for equal treatment. Even if on the registration form, you have to attest that that is what you paid for it. There is no other place in sales that treats people the way this does. If you walk into a retail store and they've got jackets on the sale rack for 50% off, you don't pay sales tax on the manufactured suggested retail price. And so I think it's unfair. And I think we need to also revisit the inspection process when it comes to those little yellow lights that are on and figure out a more appropriate timeline as to when those lights deny it inspection or they're okay, and shorten that period down to 7 or 8 years. Because I talked to the lady in Bennington, Nissan pickup. She put every component, her mechanic put every component in the system that should have affected that check engine light. Spent over $1,200. Check engine light was still on. This is a person that didn't have a lot of money and she still couldn't get her truck inspected. That $1,200's gone. Now she has a truck that she can't get inspected. I have a F-150 right now that's sitting home because my mechanic said it had too much rust. He couldn't inspect it. It's only got a little over 100,000 miles on it. Now, if you look that up in the NADA book, I'll bet that thing is worth $15,000. But can you sell a truck for $15,000 that nobody can get inspected? I don't think so. And so these two areas are dramatically affecting the people who can afford it the least. And so I just wanted to put that on the committee's agenda and hope that you could maybe work that into one of your bills.
Senator White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I so appreciate that you brought forward this specific situation that you're experiencing. And I hope that you are able to sell that vehicle for an appropriate value. Are you aware of the dealer appraisal form? You could fill that out, which would say that you believe the cost of your vehicle is less than the amount that JD Power has put forward, and you can get a refund from the DMV. Have you gone through that process?
I have not, and I don't believe that's a fair process because most people aren't going to have the time and the wherewithal to do it. The question is, why should you have to pay a tax on more than you paid for a vehicle? That is the baseline question.
We agree. So I agree.
Of
I agree.
fairness.
I agree. We have a form that's 1 page that you can fill out with the vehicle evaluation and the amount of money, and you can get a refund.
And how many places are there that will do an appraisal?
Any dealer
No, you're wrong there.
with the form, yeah.
You're
You-
wrong there because a
Okay.
lot of dealers won't do it because it takes time and they get nothing for it. I've already talked to some dealers that said, no, we don't do those anymore.
Okay, I guess if we can ask the
I think
DMV,
you
but
made your point, and I think we're gonna have DMV in there. I would say that there are a number of bills in this legislature that talk about eliminating inspections, and all of those come out of that. There's an area here that particularly lower income people that are less that aren't as sophisticated. I don't think they're aware of any form. And I don't think it's out there in front. And I think there's an area here. I constantly hear it, people that buy cars and then can't get them inspected and they're desperate to get to work. And I thank you for coming in.
You're welcome.
Raising the issue and talking to our committee about it.
Mr. Chair, I think those are two different issues. There's a difference between vehicle inspections, which I can holistically understand.
I
the
absolutely
value.
don't. And I
Oh, okay.
I
You don't,
think
you want me to stop talking?
I think you're perfectly, I'm perfectly happy to have you talk about it, but I don't think that's the case. So I just want you to know, I think there's another side to that. Vehicle inspections affect when you buy a car and you go out and you buy the car and you come back, you have to get that car inspected. And what they set for a price at DMV is based upon book value and what it might be. It doesn't, no one questions whether there's the light on it or not. If I'm someone that is struggling to get a job and working someplace cleaning rooms, and I just buy a car for $5,000 or $6,000 and the light inspection light is on, the dealers will not sell the equipment to affect the lines and whatever they call that, the system. They do not sell that system outside of the dealer process. So they're invested in that. To buy that central system is a $4,000 system. So we have lots of people, tons of people now driving around without inspection. And from my point of view, I think it all does play together. And it really, you made a system where people that are unsophisticated and struggling, as difficult as we can for them. But
No, I understand that you would like me to stop talking.
no, it isn't that I want
No,
you to
it's okay.
stop arguing.
No, it's.
You're totally entitled to your point of view. But I think there is more than one point of view on this.
I agree. And here's the form if you'd like, for the report.
I'm anxious to see what they say because I sent in the sales tax on $7,000, so I'm anxiously awaiting their little note back with my, but the point is that there are very few people who will do this anymore. And like Richie said, it creates a hurdle for the people who have the least time, the least money, and are least able to do it. And then you have to run here and run there or make a ton of phone calls and you're getting turned down because the dealers don't want to deal with giving you an appraisal on a used car that you bought from somebody. They just don't. So I thank the committee for their time and hopefully we can make some progress on this and help out, help out the people in Vermont that are struggling the most to keep cars on the road. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Which is like, yeah.
No, I don't need to speak any longer. I mean, I feel that I've been interrupted and I don't think that's appropriate. But I respect that you would like to have this time for this conversation. So I'm not going to speak any more at a time.
Well, I do have more time and I'm happy to hear your perspective. If you'd like me to sit back down.
I'm sorry you feel interrupted. You know. We do have DMV. Are you?
Thank you, Dylan. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to know some of the details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I just want to understand what's.
Yep. I would like you to
Matt Russo, Deputy Commissioner for DMV.
go ahead.
Yes, sir.
No, I was just gonna say, just an FYI, we're not gonna fix this today. We're just.
No,
gonna
I
hear
just hear.
a short perspective from you, right?
Correct. Yep. I can appreciate the Lieutenant Governor's concerns, and I think that after the discussion today, it's probably best that I bring those concerns back and have a discussion with the Commissioner, because I think there are many tracks going on right here.
And
So
I think what we would like to hear is what is the process?
the process is taxed based on the clean trade-in value in JD Power. And there is the process of the dealer appraisal. I was unaware of the
It would be nice to have it just laid out. Here's what happens and here's what the process is. And when someone is given the from the department price, do you direct them to be questioned of the value?
can you repeat that?
So if you go in and you've just transferred your vehicle and you go to DMV and you say, I transferred the vehicle and I filled out the sheet and they asked for the value and you might put in, what you paid or whatever it is, but then DMV gives the value based on JD Power. Do you give them at that point, do you say you can question this and here's where you go?
We don't unless they're asked. If they ask, why am I being taxed?
And how would someone know?
We would offer, it's on our website, all the information, but we also would offer them at that point the dealer appraisal form,
But only if they brought it up.
if it was brought up, correct.
So I just want to be clear that we're talking about, so this is the sales tax that is being
This is
charged, not the registration.
Correct. This is the purchase and use tax.
Okay.
Vehicle.
Okay, so what do you do if someone receives a car as, from a parent or someone, or if someone gives you a car?
It would.
What happens in that situation?
It would be considered a gift if, and they would complete a gift tax form.
So what would they pay?
They wouldn't pay tax
You don't pay
if it's
tax.
gifted.
So if someone got a discount, so say you got a $7,000, $12,000, 500 car for 7,000, could that differential be considered a gift?
If it was from a giftable relationship, it would have to be a complete gift.
Oh, interesting. So, and a giftable relationship is what?
There is mother, father, step parents, brother, sister.
So family. That's interesting.
If your aunt just sells her car and gives you a $10,000 deduction, they would pay the tax on JD Power.
Correct.
Interesting.
And there is a limit on gifting also, right?
There's a limit on, 2 vehicles is the limit, right? Yeah.
In what, like a period of time or ever?
Within a year.
Okay.
I give my kids 3 cars a year.
Can you adopt me?
Yeah. There's a form, it's on the website. If you could, I didn't know what the lieutenant governor was saying about on a new vehicle. Is it different for a new vehicle? I assumed it was the same, that you also go to JD Power, it's not on the sales.
We go on the purchase price from a dealer
So only for new cars.
for the cars.
Mhm.
Or used. If it comes from a Vermont dealer, it's purchased from a Vermont dealer, whether it's new or used, we
Just go for the
for tax on the
But if it's a private sale,
private
you
sale.
go to the JD Power.
Correct.
And don't they pay the tax to the dealer when they buy it, and then the dealer gives it to you all
Yes,
or us, states?
that's usually the process. Yeah.
Okay.
But if you're buying on the, you go on Facebook Marketplace and you buy a car. You get there, you buy the car. You're somebody unsophisticated that's not dealt with this. You're 25 years old and you do this. And the car has a check engine light. The transfer comes, you fill out the paperwork, you send it into DMV, you do that. DMV comes back with the JD Power. And at that point, they have to know that they should check your website and they should do this to get a form to say, I've got something wrong with the car before the transfer would happen.
Right. The information would be on our website or on the form.
And I totally appreciate the fact that the senator from Windsor brings up the form is out there. But I think for somebody that's unsophisticated and struggling and trying to work every day to get ahead, that it's not intuitive for them to say, I can question this. I think it just becomes harder for them. And at that point, I think some people get caught. And I appreciate they have a process, but.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, I've got hands and stuff and let me,
Well, I wanted to understand more about the automated systems that the dealers have that can handle the check engine light, so that's a little bit of a different topic.
yeah, it's a little bit of a different topic.
I just wanted to point out to the committee, it's not necessarily just the people with a lack of sophistication. When I went to look at this car, I was at one point an ASE certified mechanic. I know cars pretty good. I looked over the car and I said, I know I'm going to have to put several $1,000s into this car to make it right. Probably $5,000 or $6,000. Once I put that $5,000 or $6,000 into it, perhaps it'll be worth $12,500. But let's be clear, cars in Vermont do not meet that average JD Powers value because of road salt, because of rust, because of back roads. And so For me, this is clear as day. If you go on Marketplace and go look at used cars, they are not the same value that one in North Carolina is because they've lived in salt and brine. And then that insult to injury, the next year or 2 years later, you can't get it inspected because the garage says there's too much rust. And so what I am saying is we are overcharging sales tax to people who buy cars that are less than perfect.
So then that's an expanded argument that would say that in general, we ought to do a discount off of JD Power for all the cars in Vermont. So that's a whole conversation that we can have when we look at the DMV.
I think.
But I just really want to understand about the check engine light because I think what folks are saying, and it's good to have a new person in the room, is that there's software, there's proprietary software that is used to make those lights go up. Sometimes those lights mean what you think they mean. Sometimes those lights are still on because somebody didn't, hit the switch. And I think that the non-dealer repair folks don't have access to that
They don't.
Or the parts,
software.
not just
So-
the software, the parts themselves.
Okay, but the software, a lot of times that's the issue. So that is a whole conversation.
Well, the software and that whole system, only the dealers have access to it from the manufacturers.
Yeah.
So we've limited, so.
So that's something that we can talk
I-
about at a later time, but that's what the issue is. That's what part of the issue is, I believe.
So,
Okay.
Andy,
Either Mr. Russo or the Lieutenant Governor, do you know how other states might address this? Because I can see why you would want to go with some kind of, official source so that you don't get a situation where somebody says, I'm gonna write down that I sold it to you for 5,000, even though you're gonna give me $10,000 because you're gonna save the tax. And that's like just the deal that we make it a better deal for the two parties. I don't know if that's common or not, but I assume that's the reason that we go to the JD Power book. But I don't know if other states have found a way to do kind of like what the governor suggested, where you say, I attest on the pains of perjury that this was the actual sale price. And I think we do that with real estate transactions, which are a large, even larger dollar numbers, where the transfer tax is paid. And we basically would have the same issue of people gaming the system. So it would be
Right, but with the difference with the transfer tax is that if you pay $50,000 for $150,000 property, you pay the transfer tax on what you paid for it.
right. Well, but I'm saying that has to be, I guess it's for the valuation. It has to be an arm's length transaction, so you don't have people gaming the system.
Right.
So the system, you could have a side deal with your neighbor when you sell a car to avoid the tax.
Mhm.
And so we want to have some situation or something to talk about. Is that a problem? Is that why we go to JD Powers and not just the sales price? And I assume other states have dealt with that.
Yeah, I think that it depends on the state. It's kind of spread across how they process tax. Some people by sales.
Yeah, I don't wonder if any states do something like you're suggesting where you attach to it or something like.
I'm not sure, but we used to pay based on what we paid. And so this is
No, I remember.
This is
I was surprised one year I bought, and I think it was also a Subaru where I went in and then they said, oh no, the value of that car is this. I was like, oh, well, that's different than what I
Yeah.
paid, but it wasn't a big difference. So
But when it's double,
Yeah.
usually double, it is a big difference. And there's no other place in state government where you have to pay more sales tax than what you paid for something. And so attesting would be great, but like you said, it is just like real estate. There's nothing saying that they can't slip $10,000 cash under the table and get rid of it. But you do on legal documents attest that this is the amount that you paid so that you're paying the proper tax.
So I think we'll come back to that. It would be helpful if the department could run us through the process at some point.
Absolutely.
Bring the forms in at that, I recently transferred a car. And I didn't see any place on the forum where it told me I could question the value. And there, if the form had just had a line that said, if you dispute the value, go to the website and do that. Just something as simple as that. I think for some people might be the tip off to the information, but if we could understand the process better, it would be helpful.
We'd be happy to do that. Absolutely.
So, thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry if you felt that was not the intention. So